She abandoned her last delivery to save a dying stranger in the pouring rain. The elderly woman she rescued turned out to be a mafia boss's mother. Now he's decided she's family. And in his world, family is everything. The rain hit Clara's face like tiny needles as she checked her phone one last time. 11:47 p.m. 3 more deliveries, and she'd finally hit her quota for the night. Her sneakers were soaked through, and her delivery bag weighed heavy on her shoulder. The Chinese food inside was probably cold by now, but the customer at Maple Street had prepaid with no tip, so Clara didn't feel too guilty about the delay. She was cutting through the old industrial district when she saw her. An elderly woman sat slumped against a bus stop bench, one hand clutching her chest, the other reaching toward nothing. The rain poured down on her thin gray hair, soaking through her floral dress. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. Clara's heart lurched. She looked at her phone. The next delivery was 12 minutes away. If she didn't make it in 15, the app would flag her. 3 flags this month, and she'd lose the job. The woman's hand dropped. "Damn it," Clara whispered, already running. She threw her delivery bag onto the bench and dropped to her knees beside the woman. Up close, she could see the bluish tint to her lips, the shallow rise and fall of her chest. "Ma'am? Ma'am, can you hear me?" The woman's eyes fluttered open briefly, dark brown, clouded with pain. Her mouth formed a word. "Help." Clara's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm, mechanical. Address. Condition. Symptoms. "She's barely breathing," Clara said, her voice cracking. "Her pulse is weak. I think it's her heart." "Is she conscious?" "Barely. Ambulance is 12 minutes out." "Do you know CPR?" Clara had taken a class 3 years ago when she'd briefly worked at a nursing home. She remembered the dummy, the way the instructor had counted out loud. She remembered failing the test twice before passing.
Yes, Shalit.
"If she stops breathing, you'll need to start compressions. Stay with her." The call ended. Clara looked down at the woman, who was now completely still, eyes closed. For a horrible moment, Clara thought she was already gone. Then she saw it, the faintest movement of her chest. "Stay with me," Clara whispered. She took off her jacket and draped it over the woman's shoulders, though both of them were already drenched. "You're going to be okay. Help is coming." The woman's eyes opened again, just a sliver. This time, she seemed to really see Clara. Her lips moved. "Thank you." Then her eyes rolled back, and she went completely limp. No, no, no. Clara checked for pulse. Nothing. She tilted the woman's head back, pinched her nose, and gave 2 rescue breaths the way she'd learned. Then she positioned her hands over the woman's chest and started compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4. The rain was so loud, she could barely hear her own counting. Water streamed down her face, into her eyes. Her arms burned, but she didn't stop. 15, 16, 17. "Come on," she gasped. "Come on." 30 compressions. 2 breaths. 30 more compressions. Time became meaningless. Clara's world narrowed to the rhythm of compressions, the burning in her shoulders, the silent prayer running through her head.
Don't die. Please don't die.
Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. Clara didn't stop until hands pulled her back and paramedics swarmed the woman. One of them pressed a bag valve mask over her face, while another prepared a defibrillator. Clara stumbled backward, her legs shaking, and collapsed onto the wet bench. "Are you family?" a paramedic asked.
No.
I found her." "You probably saved her life. Good work." They loaded the woman onto a stretcher and into the ambulance. Clara watched, numb, as they prepared to close the doors. "Wait," she heard herself say. Can I come with her? She's alone." The paramedic hesitated, then nodded. "Come on." Clara climbed into the ambulance, completely forgetting about her delivery bag still sitting on the bench. As they sped toward the hospital, she watched the paramedics work for lines, oxygen, medications she didn't recognize. The woman's color was slowly improving, her breathing steadier. At the hospital, Clara paced the emergency room waiting area while nurses rushed back and forth. Her phone buzzed continuously. 7 missed deliveries. 4 angry messages from customers. 1 notification from the app. Your account has been temporarily suspended. She should care.
She needed this job.
She was already 2 months behind on rent. But every time she thought about leaving, she pictured the woman's eyes, the way she'd mouth thank you before losing consciousness. At 2:30 a.m., a nurse approached her. Are you the young woman who came in with Mrs. Russo?
Yes.
Is she stable? She's stable now. You did CPR? Clara nodded. You saved her life, the nurse said simply. Another few minutes and…
Well.
She's asking for you. Clara followed her to a room at the end of the hall. The woman, Mrs. Russo, lay in bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, but her eyes were clear and alert. When she saw Clara, she smiled. You, she said, her voice raspy but warm. My angel. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I'm just glad you're okay. What's your name, dear? Clara. Clara Mitchell. Clara, Mrs. Russo reached out a trembling hand, and Clara took it. I won't forget this. I won't forget you. Before Clara could respond, the nurse mentioned something about medication costs and insurance. Clara's stomach sank when she heard the amount, $340 for the emergency medication, not covered by Mrs. Russo's insurance until morning when the pharmacy could process prior authorization. Without thinking, Clara pulled out her credit card. It was supposed to be for emergencies only, already maxed out except for $400 in available credit. I'll cover it, she said quietly. Mrs. Russo tried to protest, but Clara was already at the billing desk. 20 minutes later, prescription in hand and delivered to the nurse, Clara slipped out of the hospital into the pre-dawn darkness. The rain had stopped. The streets were empty. She walked home, 3 miles in wet clothes, and collapsed on her bed just as the sun began to rise. She had no job, no money, and no idea that the woman she'd saved was about to change her life forever. Clara woke to the sound of car doors slamming. She groaned and rolled over, squinting at her phone. 10:23 a.m. She'd slept less than 4 hours, and every muscle in her body ached from the CPR compressions. Her shoulders felt like someone had taken a baseball bat to them. More doors slammed outside. Then another. And another. Clara dragged herself to the window of her third-floor apartment and pulled back the thin curtain. Her breath caught. 5 black SUVs lined the street below, parked in perfect formation like something out of a movie. Men in dark suits stood beside each vehicle, scanning the area with a kind of alertness that made Clara's stomach twist. One of them spoke into his wrist, and Clara realized he was wearing an earpiece. What the hell? She whispered. Her neighbors were gathered on the sidewalk, phones out, filming. Mrs. Chun from downstairs was pointing up at Clara's building. Then the center SUV's back door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, probably in his mid-40s, with salt and pepper hair swept back from a sharp, angular face. His suit looked expensive, the kind Clara had only seen in magazines. He moved with absolute confidence, and the other men immediately fell into formation around him. He said something to one of them, who nodded and pointed directly at Clara's building. At her window. Clara jumped back, her heart hammering. Were they police? FBI? Had she done something wrong at the hospital? A knock at her door made her jump again. She stood frozen in her tiny living room, really just a corner of her studio apartment with a sagging couch she'd found on Craigslist. The knock came again, firmer this time. Miss Mitchell? We need to speak with you. The voice was calm, professional. Not threatening, but not exactly friendly either. Clara crept to the door and looked through the peephole. 2 men in suits stood in the hallway. Behind them, she could see a third man stationed by the stairwell. Who are you? She called through the door. My name is Marco DeLuca. I work for Giovanni Russo. He'd like to speak with you about last night.
Russo.
Mrs. Russo, the woman from the bus stop. Clara's fear shifted into confusion. She unlocked the door but kept the chain on, opening it just a crack. The man closest to her, Marco, was in his 30s with a neat beard and eyes that seemed to catalog everything about her in an instant. But his expression softened when he saw her face. Miss Mitchell, I apologize for the intimidating arrival. Mr. Russo wanted to thank you personally for what you did for his mother. May he come up? His mother? You mean Mrs. Russo? Is she okay? She's doing very well, thanks to you. Please, Mr. Russo just wants 5 minutes of your time. Clara hesitated, then nodded and closed the door to remove the chain. When she opened it fully, Marco stepped aside, and the man from downstairs appeared at the top of the stairwell. Up close, Giovanni Russo was even more imposing. He had the kind of presence that filled a room, or in this case, a narrow apartment hallway. But when his eyes met Clara's, something in his expression softened. Miss Mitchell, he said, his voice surprisingly warm. May I come in? Clara suddenly became hyper-aware of her apartment. The stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the dishes in the sink, the mattress on the floor because she'd sold her bed frame 2 months ago. But she stepped back and let him enter. Giovanni walked in alone, though Marco remained just outside the door. He looked around the apartment, and Clara couldn't read his expression. Judgment? Pity? She felt her cheeks burn. I apologize for showing up unannounced, Giovanni said, turning to face her. But I needed to meet the woman who saved my mother's life. Anyone would have done the same thing, Clara said quietly. No, Giovanni's voice was firm. They wouldn't have. My mother was alone at that bus stop for nearly 30 minutes before you arrived. 7 people walked past her. Our security footage shows it clearly. Clara blinked. Security footage? The warehouse across the street. We own it. Giovanni moved closer, his expression intense. You didn't just call 911 and wait, Miss Mitchell. You performed CPR for 9 minutes. You rode with her in the ambulance. You paid for her medication with money you clearly don't have. Clara's face grew hot. How did you? The hospital billing records. I hope you don't mind. I had it refunded to your card this morning, with an additional amount to cover your trouble. That's not necessary. I didn't do it for money. I know you didn't. Giovanni reached into his jacket and Clara tensed, but he only pulled out an envelope. That's what makes this even more remarkable. According to my people, you also lost your job because of what you did last night. Clara felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. Your people? I needed to know who saved my mother's life. Giovanni's tone wasn't apologetic. Isabella Russo is the most important person in my world, Miss Mitchell. When someone risks everything to help her, I make it my business to understand why. I didn't risk everything. I couldn't leave her there. Giovanni studied her face for a long moment. Then, he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a polite smile, but something genuine, almost surprised. My mother said you were an angel. I'm beginning to think she was right. He held out the envelope. Please.
Take it.
Consider it a small token of my family's gratitude. Clara didn't move. I don't want your money, Mr. Russo. I'm just glad your mother is okay. For a moment, Giovanni looked like no one had ever refused him anything before. Then his smile widened. You're remarkable, he said softly. But I insist. At least let me cover what you lost. Your job, the medication, your time. No, really. Then have dinner with us. Giovanni changed tactics smoothly. Tonight. My mother wants to thank you properly. She'll be devastated if you refuse. Clara hesitated. There was something about this man that set off warning bells, but she couldn't quite place why. Still, the thought of Mrs. Russo disappointed made her chest ache. Just dinner? She asked. Just dinner. I promise. Giovanni placed the envelope on her counter anyway. 7 p.m. Marco will pick you up. Please, Miss Mitchell. It would mean everything to my mother. Before Clara could argue, he was gone, Marco closing the door softly behind them. Clara stood in her apartment, staring at the envelope. She told herself she wouldn't open it. She opened it. Inside was a check for $50,000. Clara stared at the check until the numbers blurred. $50,000. She'd never seen that much money in one place. It was more than she'd made in 2 years of delivery work. It was enough to pay off her rent, her credit cards, her student loans from the community college semester she'd dropped out of. It was too much. She grabbed her phone and searched Giovanni Russo. The results made her blood run cold. Businessman and philanthropist Giovanni Russo donates to Children's Hospital. Russo Family Foundation awards scholarships. Giovanni Russo expands real estate empire across tri-state area. But it was the third page of results that made her hands shake. Alleged organized crime figure Giovanni Russo acquitted in federal trial. FBI investigation into Russo family continues despite lack of evidence. Clara's apartment suddenly felt very small. She looked at the check again, then at her door, remembering the men in suits, the SUVs, the way everyone had moved around Giovanni, like soldiers around a general. "Oh God," she whispered. "What did I get myself into?" Across town, in a penthouse office overlooking the city, Giovanni sat behind a massive mahogany desk while Marco stood nearby with a tablet. "Background check is complete," Marco said. "Clara Jane Mitchell, 24 years old. Born in Ohio, moved here 3 years ago. No family, parents died in a car accident when she was 19. No siblings." Giovanni's expression darkened. "She's alone?" "Completely. She's been working delivery jobs since she arrived. Before that, she was a nursing assistant, but the facility closed. She tried college for 1 semester, but couldn't afford to continue." "Financials?" Marco scrolled through his tablet. "She's drowning. 3 months behind on rent. Her landlord's been threatening eviction. 17,000 in debt between credit cards and student loans. Her bank account has $43 in it as of this morning." Giovanni leaned back in his chair. "And yet she spent $340 on my mother's medication." "Money she didn't have," Marco confirmed. "That card was maxed out. She'll be paying 23% interest on it." "Criminal record?"
Clean.
"Not even a parking ticket. I checked her social media. She barely uses it. No photos, no drama." Her former coworkers all say the same thing. Quiet, hardworking, kind. One of them said she once gave her last $20 to a homeless veteran. Giovanni was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "What are you thinking?" Marco asked carefully. "I'm thinking that girl has more integrity than half the men who work for us." Giovanni stood and walked to the window. "Did she cash the check?" "Not yet. I have someone watching her bank. And she left her apartment 2 hours ago. Took the bus downtown. She's at the gig economy office trying to get her delivery job reinstated." Giovanni turned. "Is she getting it back?" Marco shook his head. "They have a 3-strike policy. She's been flagged too many times. They're telling her no." Clara sat in the hard plastic chair, trying not to cry. The manager, a guy barely older than her with a patchy beard and a superiority complex, leaned back in his chair. "Look, I get it. You had an emergency. But the policy is clear. 3 strikes in 30 days, you're out." "But I explained what happened. A woman was dying. And that's great." "Really? Good for you," his tone said. He didn't care at all. "But we have thousands of drivers. If we made exceptions for everyone's sob story, the whole system would collapse." Clara's hands clenched in her lap. "Can I reapply?" "Not for 6 months. And, honestly," he glanced at his computer screen, "your rating wasn't great anyway. Late deliveries, customer complaints about cold food." "Because I was working 3 different apps at once to make enough money to live," Clara said quietly. He shrugged. "Not my problem. Have a good day, Miss Mitchell." Clara walked out into the bright afternoon sun, feeling numb. She checked her phone, 2 emails, both rejections from jobs she'd applied to last week. She had one interview scheduled for tomorrow, a night shift at a gas station. She didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street or the man inside taking photos. That evening, Marco updated Giovanni while he got ready for dinner with his mother. She spent the afternoon applying to jobs online. Fast food, retail, cleaning services. She's applying to everything. Marco paused. Boss, she's also been researching you. She knows who you are. Giovanni adjusted his tie in the mirror. Of course she does. She's smart. Will she still come to dinner? Yes. How do you know? Giovanni smiled slightly. Because she made a promise to my mother. And that girl doesn't break promises.
He was right.
At exactly 7 p.m., Clara stood outside her apartment building in the only dress she owned, a simple navy blue one she'd worn to her parents' funeral. She'd spent an hour trying to decide if she should go, had picked up her phone to call and cancel a dozen times. But she kept thinking about Mrs. Russo's face, the way she'd called Clara an angel. The black SUV pulled up and Marco stepped out. Good evening, Miss Mitchell. His expression was neutral, professional. Mr. Russo is looking forward to seeing you again. Clara got in the car, the check still sitting on her counter at home, untouched. As they drove through the city, Clara watched the buildings pass by, unaware that in 3 other vehicles, Giovanni's men were conducting their own surveillance, checking her routes, her habits, the people she interacted with. By the time they reached the Russo estate, Giovanni knew everything there was to know about Clara Mitchell. What he didn't know was that other people were watching her too. And they were far more dangerous. The dinner had been surreal. Clara had expected something cold and formal, but Mrs. Russo had greeted her with tears and a crushing hug. The meal was intimate, just the 3 of them in a dining room that could have seated 30. Giovanni had been charming, asking about her life, her dreams, never once making her feel small despite the obvious wealth surrounding them. When Marco drove her home at 11 p.m., Clara felt lighter than she had in months. That feeling lasted exactly 12 hours. She woke to aggressive pounding on her door. Mitchell, open up. Clara stumbled out of bed, confused and disoriented. The pounding continued, making her thin door rattle in its frame. I'm coming, she called, pulling on a sweatshirt. She opened the door to find her landlord, Eddie Caruso, standing in the hallway. He was a short, thick man with greasy hair and a perpetual sneer. Behind him stood another man Clara didn't recognize, taller, with a neck tattoo and cold eyes. Rent's going up, Eddie announced without preamble. Clara blinked. What? New policy. Effective immediately. $1,500 a month instead of $800 each. That's insane. You can't just. I can do whatever I want. It's my building. Eddie's eyes gleamed with something ugly. Unless you got a problem with it. Clara's mind raced. 800 was already stretching her budget to breaking. 1,500 was impossible. Eddie, please. I'm already behind. Can we? Yeah. I heard you got some new rich friends. Eddie stepped closer, and Clara caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. Saw all those fancy cars yesterday. The whole neighborhood saw. So either you can afford the new rent, or you can get your sugar daddy to pay it. Clara's face burned. It's not like that. Don't care what it's like. Eddie pulled out a folded paper from his jacket and shoved it at her. New lease agreement. Sign it by Friday or you're out. He turned and walked away, the other man following. But the stranger looked back at Clara, his gaze lingering in a way that made her skin crawl. Clara closed her door and leaned against it, her hands shaking. By noon, the entire building knew about the rent increase. Mrs. Chen cornered Clara in the lobby. Is it true? Eddie's raising everyone's rent. Just mine, I think, Clara said quietly. Because of those men yesterday? The cars. Mrs. Chen lowered her voice. Clara, who were those people? Just someone I helped. It's nothing. But it wasn't nothing, and they both knew it. As Clara walked to the corner store for coffee, she couldn't afford her usual cafe anymore. She noticed things she'd missed before. A man in a gray jacket standing across the street, watching her building. Another man sitting in a parked car, engine off, just waiting. When she entered the store, the owner, Mr. Patel, gave her a strange look. Clara, you okay?
Fine. Why?
He glanced toward the window. Some men came by this morning, asking about you, what hours you keep, where you work, if you have visitors. Clara's stomach dropped. What kind of men? Not police.
Not.
Nice men. Mr. Patel handed her the coffee, waving away her money. Be careful, okay? Whatever you're involved in. I'm not involved in anything. But Mr. Patel's expression said he didn't believe her. That afternoon, Clara's phone rang from an unknown number. Miss Mitchell? An unfamiliar voice, smooth and oily. My name is Tony Marconi. I'm a friend of your landlord. Clara's grip tightened on her phone. I don't know you, but I know you. I know you've become quite friendly with the Russo family.
That's
interesting. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play dumb, sweetheart. Those 5 SUVs outside your apartment? That was Giovanni Russo himself. Very rare for him to make house calls a pause. I'd like to meet with you. Just to chat. Maybe at Luigi's on 5th Street? Tomorrow, say 2 p.m.? I'm not interested. I think you are. See, that rent increase Eddie hit you with? That was my suggestion. But I could make it go away. I could make a lot of your problems go away, his voice dropped. Or I could make new ones. Your choice. The line went dead. Clara stood frozen in her apartment, her heart hammering. She didn't understand what was happening. She'd just helped an old woman. How had her life spiraled into this in less than 48 hours? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We should talk. Luigi's. 2 p.m. tomorrow. Don't make me ask twice. Attached was a photo of Clara taken that morning, walking to the store. Someone was following her. Clara's hands shook as she scrolled through her contacts. She had no family, no close friends, no one she could call for help. Except. She pulled out the card Marco had given her at dinner. If you need anything, he'd said. Clara stared at it for a long moment. Calling that number would mean admitting she was in over her head. It would mean getting more involved with Giovanni Russo and whatever world he inhabited. But what choice did she have? Before she could dial, her door buzzer rang. Clara jumped, her nerves already frayed. She went to the intercom. Hello. Static, then. Delivery for Clara Mitchell. I didn't order anything. It's already paid for, miss. Just need you to sign. Clara went downstairs cautiously. A delivery driver stood outside with a small package. He seemed normal enough, young, bored, holding a tablet for her signature. She signed and took the package upstairs. Inside was a new phone, top of the line, with a note in elegant handwriting. Miss Mitchell, use this phone for anything you need. My personal number is programmed as contact number 1. My mother would be very upset if anything happened to you. Clara turned on the phone. It was already activated, already set up. Contact number 1 simply read, Giovanni. She looked at the window, at the men still watching her building. Then she looked at the phone in her hand. The trap was closing around her, and Clara was beginning to realize she'd walked into something far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. The only question was whether Giovanni Russo was her way out, or the biggest danger of all. Clara didn't go to Luigi's. Instead, she spent the next morning at a temp agency, desperate for any work. They placed her immediately. A catering company needed servers for corporate events. The pay was terrible, but it was something. Her first event was a business lunch at the Riverside Hotel. She was carrying a tray of champagne flutes when she saw him. Giovanni Russo sat at a corner table with 3 other men in expensive suits, discussing something in low tones. His eyes found Clara across the room, and for a brief moment, surprise flickered across his face. Then he smiled. Clara nearly dropped the tray. She quickly turned away, serving other guests, her pulse racing. It had to be a coincidence. The city was big, but not that big. Rich people went to nice hotels. It didn't mean anything. Except when she glanced back, Giovanni was watching her. An hour later, as she cleared plates from the buffet table, a voice spoke behind her. The salmon was excellent. Clara turned. Giovanni stood there, hands casually in his pockets, looking completely at ease. "Mr. Russo," she managed. "Please, Giovanni." He glanced at her catering uniform. "New job. Temporary. Until I find something better. How are you settling in with the phone I sent?" Clara hesitated. She'd carried it with her, but hadn't used it.
It's
"Generous. But I can't accept." "You can, and you will." His tone was gentle but firm. "Have you had any more problems? With your landlord or anyone else?" Clara's throat tightened. How did he know about Eddie? "I can handle it." Giovanni's expression darkened. "Clara, if someone is bothering you..." "I said I can handle it." The words came out sharper than she intended. "I appreciate your concern, but I don't need to be rescued again." For a moment, Giovanni looked like he might argue. Then he nodded slowly. "Of course. Forgive me." He pulled out his wallet and handed her a business card, different from the one Marco had given her. "But if you change your mind, my office number is here. Day or night." He walked away, leaving Clara standing there with the card in her hand and a strange mixture of relief and disappointment in her chest. 2 days later, Clara was at the public library, using their free internet to apply for jobs, when someone sat down across from her.
Giovanni.
Clara stared at him. "Are you following me?" "I'm researching a property investment nearby." He gestured vaguely toward the window. "I saw you through the window and thought I'd say hello." "Is that a crime?" "This is getting weird." "Is it?" Giovanni leaned back in his chair. "Or is this city smaller than you think?" Clara closed her laptop. "What do you really want, Giovanni?" "To understand you," he said it simply, without artifice. "You saved my mother's life and asked for nothing in return. In my world, that doesn't happen. Everyone wants something." "Maybe I'm not from your world." "Exactly," Giovanni smiled. "That's what makes you fascinating." Before Clara could respond, her phone, the old one, buzzed. A text from an unknown number, still waiting for that meeting. Getting impatient. Her face must have shown something, because Giovanni's expression sharpened. "What is it?" "Nothing." "Clara." "I have to go." She grabbed her laptop and stood, but Giovanni caught her wrist, gently, but firmly enough to stop her. "Someone is threatening you," he said quietly. "I can see it on your face. Let me help."
Why?
Clara pulled her hand back. "Why do you care so much? You don't even know me." Giovanni was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. "My mother had a heart condition for years. She refused to take it seriously, refused to slow down. The night you found her, she'd been at the bus stop because her driver was late and she was too stubborn to wait inside." His jaw tightened. "If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't done exactly what you did, I would have lost her. So yes, Clara Mitchell, I care what happens to you. Because you gave me more time with the only person in this world who matters to me." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "I don't want to owe anyone anything," she whispered. "You don't owe me anything. But let me return the favor. Let me make sure you're safe." Across the city, in a private office above a nightclub, Tony Marconi threw his phone across the room. "The girl's not cooperating," he snarled at Eddie Caruso, who stood nervously by the door. "I told you this was a stupid idea." "She's got no one else to turn to," Eddie protested. "She'll come around. She's got Giovanni fucking Russo now, you idiot." Tony paced, his face red. "You saw those cars. You think he's just being charitable? He's protecting her. So what do we do?" Tony stopped pacing, his eyes cold. "We remind her that Giovanni can't be everywhere at once." That evening, Giovanni sat in his office, while Marco delivered his daily report. "She's working 3 part-time jobs now. Catering, grocery delivery, overnight data entry. She's sleeping maybe 4 hours a night. And the threats. Marconi's crew. They're trying to pressure her into informing on you, meeting locations, security details, family movements." Giovanni's hands clenched. "She hasn't responded?" She's ignored every message. Marco paused. Boss, your advisors are getting nervous. Connie thinks she could be a plant. Rizzo wants to know why you're wasting resources on a civilian. What do you think? Marco considered carefully. I think she's exactly what she appears to be. Which is why Marconi wants her. He thinks she's an easy mark. But she's also vulnerable, and we can't protect someone who won't accept protection. Giovanni stared out at the city lights. What did my mother say? She wants Clara to move into the guest house. She's already having it prepared. Of course she is. Giovanni smiled slightly, then grew serious. Increase surveillance on Clara. I want eyes on her 24 hours. And Marco? If Marconi's people make a move, any move, I want to know immediately. Understood. After Marco left, Giovanni picked up his phone and scrolled to Clara's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. She was stubborn, independent, determined to handle everything alone. It reminded him of someone else, himself, 20 years ago, before he'd learned that some battles couldn't be won alone. He just hoped Clara would learn that lesson before it was too late. Clara's overnight data entry shift ended at 6 a.m. She stepped out of the office building into the gray pre-dawn light, exhausted and running on her third cup of bad coffee. Two men were waiting by the entrance. She recognized one of them, the man with the neck tattoo who'd been with Eddie. The other was older, wearing a leather jacket despite the warm morning, with a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. Clara Mitchell, the older one said. It wasn't a question. Clara's stomach dropped, but she kept walking. I don't know you. They fell into step on either side of her. The street was empty. The nearest open business was 3 blocks away. We work for Tony Marconi, Neck Tattoo said. He's disappointed you missed your meeting. I'm not interested in meeting anyone. That's not friendly. The older man moved closer, forcing Clara toward the alley beside the building. We're trying to help you, sweetheart. Your landlord's being a real bastard, isn't he? $1,500 a month for that dump. Clara stopped walking. What do you want? Information. The older man smiled, showing yellowed teeth. Your new friend Giovanni Russo. Where does he like to eat? Where does he take meetings? Who comes and goes from his properties? I don't know anything about that. But you could find out. You've been to his house. You've got his personal number. Neck Tattoo pulled out his phone, showing Clara a photo of her entering the Russo estate. You're close now. His mother loves you. He trusts you. Clara's hands clenched. I'm not spying on anyone. It's not spying. It's survival. The older man's voice hardened. You're drowning, girl. Behind on rent, working 3 jobs, eating ramen for dinner. We can fix all that. Tony's generous with people who help him. And if I don't? The smile vanished. Then your life gets a lot harder. Eddie's rent increase was just the beginning. We can make sure you don't get any jobs. We can make sure your landlord finds reasons to call the cops every single day. We can make you wish you'd never heard the name Russo. Clara's heart hammered, but she met his eyes. No. What? I said no. I'm not helping you. Her voice shook, but she didn't back down. Giovanni and his mother have been nothing but kind to me. I won't betray them. Neck Tattoo grabbed her arm, squeezing hard enough to hurt. You think Russo actually cares about you? You're nothing to him. A project. A charity case. Let go of me. You're making a mistake. I said let Gio. Clara yanked her arm free and ran. She heard footsteps behind her, but didn't look back, just sprinted down the street toward the 24-hour convenience store on the corner. She burst through the door, startling the clerk. Call the police, she gasped. There are men. But when she looked back through the window, the street was empty. The clerk stared at her. You okay, lady? Clara's legs felt like water. She collapsed against the counter, her breath coming in short gasps. She wasn't okay. She was terrified. 15 minutes later, sitting on the curb outside the store with a bottle of water the clerk had given her, Clara pulled out the phone Giovanni had sent her. Her finger hovered over contact number 1. Pride told her to handle this herself. To go to the regular police, file a report, let the system work. But she wasn't stupid. She'd seen enough movies, heard enough stories. Men like Tony Marconi didn't fear police reports. She pressed the button. Giovanni answered on the first ring. Clara? They came after me. The words tumbled out. 2 men. They wanted me to spy on you, to give them information. They grabbed me and I ran, but… Where are you? Giovanni's voice was sharp, alert. Right now, where are you? Clara gave him the address. Don't move. Someone will be there in 3 minutes. Giovanni, I'm scared. I know.
I'm sorry.
This is my fault, he paused. But you did the right thing, Clara. Calling me was the right thing. 2 minutes and 40 seconds later, a black SUV pulled up. Marco got out, his expression grim. Miss Mitchell, are you hurt? Clara shook her head. Get in. We're taking you somewhere safe. An hour later, Clara sat in Giovanni's penthouse office, a blanket around her shoulders and hot tea in her hands. Giovanni sat across from her, his face carved from stone as she described the encounter in detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Marconi, he finally said. Tony Marconi is a parasite who's been trying to muscle into my territory for 2 years. He thinks you're a weak point.
I'm sorry, Clara whispered.
I never meant to cause problems. Stop, Giovanni leaned forward. You didn't cause anything. This is what Marconi does. He finds innocent people and tries to use them as weapons. His eyes met hers. But you didn't break. You refused him, even when you were scared. Do you know how rare that is? Clara's throat tightened. What happens now? Now we make sure you're protected. Giovanni pulled out his phone and typed something. Marco is already increasing security. You'll have someone watching you at all times, discreetly. You won't even know they're there. I can't live like this. You won't have to. Not for long. Giovanni's voice was cold. Marconi made a mistake putting his hands on you. He'll regret it. Something in his tone made Clara shiver. Giovanni, what are you going to do? He didn't answer directly. I'm going to make sure no one threatens you again. That afternoon, Tony Marconi received a package at his office. Inside was a photo of him eating lunch with his daughter at her school, taken that very day. Underneath, a note in elegant handwriting. Touch her again, and I'll forget I'm a civilized man. Gr. Tony stared at the photo, his hands shaking. He'd made an enemy of the most dangerous man in the city. And Clara Mitchell, whether she knew it or not, was now under the protection of the Russo family, which meant she was no longer just a target. She was untouchable. 3 days after the encounter with Marconi's men, Clara came home from her catering shift to find a notice taped to her door. Notice of eviction. Violation of lease agreement. Illegal subletting. Tenant has 48 hours to vacate premises. Clara ripped the paper down, her hands shaking. Illegal subletting? She lived alone. She'd never sublet anything in her life. She pounded on Eddie's door downstairs. When he finally answered, his smirk told her everything she needed to know. What is this? Clara shoved the notice at him. It's an eviction notice. Can't you read? Eddie leaned against his doorframe, arms crossed. Multiple tenants reported seeing different people coming and going from your apartment at all hours. Men in suits. Black cars. Looks like you're running some kind of operation up there. That's insane. I'm not subletting. Got 3 signed witness statements right here. He patted his pocket. Mrs. Chun, the Patels, and old Mr. Washington. All say the same thing. Clara's stomach dropped. Those were her neighbors, people she'd lived near for 3 years. They wouldn't lie about me. They would if they thought you were endangering the building. Eddie's eyes glinted with malice. Or if someone explained that you've gotten mixed up with dangerous people. You know, for their own safety. You told them to lie. I told them the truth, that you're a liability. And now I want you gone. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You had your chance, sweetheart. Could have played nice with Marconi's people. Could have made everyone's life easier. But you had to go running to Russo like a little snitch. Clara's face burned. I never. Save it. You've got 48 hours. After that, I'm changing the locks and putting your stuff on the street. And good luck finding another place in this city with an eviction on your record." He slammed the door in her face. Clara spent the next hour knocking on her neighbors' doors. Mrs. Chin wouldn't answer. Mr. Patel opened his door just a crack, his face full of apology. "I'm sorry, Clara. Eddie said if we didn't sign the statements, he'd raise all our rents too. I have 3 kids." "I understand," Clara said quietly, even though she didn't. Even though it felt like the world was crumbling around her. She went back to her apartment and pulled out her laptop, searching for rooms to rent, apartments, anything. But every application required references, background checks, first and last month's rent she didn't have. And now she had less than 2 days to find something. Her phone buzzed. The new one Giovanni had given her. A text from him. "Marco says you received an eviction notice. This is illegal. I can have my lawyers." Clara turned the phone off. She didn't want lawyers. Didn't want Giovanni fixing this. Every time he helped her, the target on her back grew bigger. Maybe Eddie was right. Maybe she was a liability. At midnight, Clara started packing. She didn't have much. Her clothes fit into 2 duffel bags. Her books went into a cardboard box. The few dishes, the lamp she'd bought at a yard sale, the threadbare towels, everything she owned fit into the back of a car, if she had a car. She sat on her mattress, surrounded by boxes, and finally let herself cry. She'd come to this city 3 years ago with hope. After her parents died, after the funeral expenses ate through their tiny life insurance policy, she thought she could start over, make something of herself. Instead, she was being evicted based on lies, threatened by gangsters, and caught in the middle of something she didn't understand. Her phone, the old one, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you're moving out. Smart girl. Russo can't protect you if he doesn't know where you are. Come work for us. Offer still stands." Clara threw the phone across the room. She pulled out Giovanni's phone and stared at it. One call, and this would be over. He'd send lawyers, or worse. He'd make Eddie disappear, probably. She'd seen enough in the past week to know that Giovanni Russo was not a man you crossed. But what would that make her? Someone who used violence to solve her problems? Someone who led a criminal, and that's what Giovanni was. She'd read the articles, fight her battles. Her parents had raised her better than that. She turned the phone off again and went back to packing. At 3 a.m., Clara heard voices in the hallway outside her apartment. She froze, listening. "Tell Marconi she's moving out." Got nowhere to go, Eddie's voice, low and smug. "She call Russo?" Another man's voice, unfamiliar.
Nah.
"She's too proud. Girl thinks she can handle everything herself," Eddie laughed. "She'll be homeless by tomorrow night. Then she'll be desperate. That's when Marconi can make his move." "What about Russo's people? They watching her?" "Not tonight. I checked. They pulled back yesterday. Probably think the threat's over since Marconi went quiet." The voices faded as they walked away. Clara sat in the darkness, her heart pounding. She'd been so stupid, so stubborn. She'd thought refusing Giovanni's help was noble, thought she was being strong and independent. But Eddie was right. She was proud. And her pride was going to leave her homeless and vulnerable to men who wanted to use her against the one person who'd actually tried to help. Clara looked at the boxes stacked around her apartment, at the eviction notice crumpled on the floor, at her 2 phones sitting side by side on the counter. She'd tried to handle this alone. She'd failed. At 3:47 a.m., Clara picked up Giovanni's phone with shaking hands and typed a message. "I need help. Please." She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came in less than 30 seconds. "On my way." Clara pulled her knees to her chest and waited, surrounded by boxes, for the consequences of finally admitting she couldn't do this alone. Outside her window, the city lights flickered like distant stars. And somewhere in the darkness, Eddie Caruso made the biggest mistake of his life, assuming that Giovanni Russo would let Clara Mitchell slip through his fingers. 20 minutes after Clara sent the text, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Multiple sets. Then a firm knock at her door. "Clara, it's Marco. I'm with Mr. Russo's attorney." Clara opened the door to find Marco standing with an older woman in an impeccable gray suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Behind them, 2 other men in suits stood guard. "Miss Mitchell," the woman said crisply, extending her hand. "I'm Victoria Chun, counsel for the Russo family. May we come in?" Clara stepped aside, suddenly self-conscious about the boxes and chaos. Victoria's sharp eyes took in everything: the packed belongings, the crumpled eviction notice, Clara's red-rimmed eyes. "I understand you received an illegal eviction notice," Victoria said, pulling documents from her briefcase. "Fraudulent claims of subletting." "Yes, but nothing. It's textbook harassment." Victoria spread papers across Clara's small table. "Mr. Russo asked me to handle this personally. Now, I've spent the last 3 hours doing some research on your landlord, Edward Caruso." She pulled out a thick folder. "Eddie owns this building through a shell company called Riverside Properties, LLC. But the property is mortgaged to the hilt, $700,000 owed to 3 different lenders. He's 4 months behind on payments." Victoria's smile was razor-sharp. "As of 1 hour ago, Mr. Russo purchased all 3 of those debts." Clara's eyes widened. "What?" "Giovanni now owns Eddie's mortgage," Marco explained. "Every penny he owes." Victoria continued, pulling out more documents. "But it gets better. In researching Mr. Caruso's finances, we discovered several interesting things. He's been collecting rent in cash and not reporting it. He's claimed insurance on fake water damage 3 times. And most importantly, she tapped a document with one perfectly manicured finger. He's been accepting payments from the Marconi organization to facilitate criminal activities on the premises." "Criminal activities?" Clara whispered. "Drug distribution through several apartments. Money laundering through fake leases. Eddie's been letting Marconi use this building as a front." Victoria's expression was cold. "Which makes every tenant here, including you, potential witnesses in a federal investigation." Clara sank into a chair. "Oh my God." "Don't worry. You're protected." Marco moved to the window, checking the street below. "But Eddie? He's done." Victoria gathered her documents. "By 9 a.m. tomorrow, the IRS will have an anonymous tip about his unreported income. By 10 a.m., his mortgage lenders, now Mr. Russo, will file foreclosure proceedings. By noon, the FBI will receive documentation of his connections to Marconi's organization." She snapped her briefcase shut. "By sunset tomorrow, Edward Caruso will be in federal custody." Clara's head spun. This is all legal?" "Perfectly legal," Victoria confirmed. "Everything I'm filing is truthful and documented. Eddie built his own trap. We're just springing it." "What about the other tenants? Mrs. Chun, the Patels?" "They'll be protected," Marco assured her. "When the building changes hands, Giovanni will ensure fair leases for everyone. No rent increases. No retaliation. Changes hands." Clara looked between them. Victoria smiled. "Once the foreclosure completes, Mr. Russo will own the building. He plans to renovate it, bring it up to code, and manage it properly. Your neighbors will actually benefit from this." Clara's mind raced. It was brilliant. Ruthless, but brilliant. Giovanni wasn't just protecting her. He was dismantling Eddie's entire operation, legally, in a way that would help everyone Eddie had been exploiting. "There's more," Marco said quietly. He pulled out his phone and showed Clara a photo. Eddie, getting into a car with 2 men she recognized, Marconi's people. "This was taken an hour ago. Eddie's been feeding information to Marconi about you. Your schedule, when Russo's people aren't watching everything." Clara felt sick. He was setting me up.
Yes.
But he underestimated how quickly we could move. Marco pocketed his phone. "By tomorrow morning, Eddie won't be in any position to help Marconi. And Marconi will know that touching Giovanni Russo's interests, including you, comes with consequences. Victoria moved toward the door. Miss Mitchell, I suggest you get some sleep. In the morning, you can unpack these boxes. You're not going anywhere. After they left, only Marco remained. He looked at the boxes, then at Clara. I know this is overwhelming, he said gently. But Giovanni wants you to understand something. This isn't just about protecting you. Eddie was a criminal. He deserved this. We're just accelerating justice. Is that what you call it? Clara's voice was barely a whisper. What would you call it? Clara thought about Eddie's smirk, his threats, the way he'd turned her neighbors against her. She thought about the 2 days she'd spent terrified and alone, too proud to ask for help. Karma, she finally said. Marco smiled slightly. Get some rest, Miss Mitchell. Tomorrow's going to be an interesting day. At 6 a.m., Clara woke to the sound of sirens. She rushed to the window and saw 4 FBI vehicles parked outside. Agents in windbreakers were leading Eddie out of the building in handcuffs. He was shouting something, but she couldn't make out the words. Mrs. Chin stood on the sidewalk with other tenants, watching. When she looked up and saw Clara in the window, she raised her hand in a tentative wave. Clara waved back. Her phone buzzed. A text from Giovanni. Problem solved. Take the day off. Come to dinner tonight, my mother insists. Clara looked at the boxes stacked around her apartment, then at the eviction notice on the table. She picked it up and tore it into small pieces. By 9 a.m., as Victoria had promised, the foreclosure papers were filed. By noon, the IRS had frozen Eddie's accounts. By sunset, Edward Caruso had been charged with tax evasion, fraud, and conspiracy to facilitate organized crime. His entire criminal network collapsed in less than 12 hours. And Clara Mitchell learned a valuable lesson. Giovanni Russo didn't just protect people. He destroyed anyone who threatened them. The question was, did that make her safer, or had she just traded one dangerous situation for another? Dinner at the Russo estate was different this time. Isabella wasn't there. It was just Clara and Giovanni in a smaller, more intimate dining room. Candles flickered on the table, and through the windows, the city spread out below like a carpet of stars. My mother wanted to be here, Giovanni said, pouring wine into Clara's glass. But I asked her to give us time to talk. Alone. Clara's stomach tightened. About what? About what happens next. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was exquisite, but Clara barely tasted it. Finally, Giovanni set down his fork and looked at her directly. I need to be honest with you, Clara. Completely honest. Okay. You've read about me. You know what people say. Giovanni's voice was steady, matter of fact. Some of it is true. I'm not a saint. I run businesses that exist in gray areas. I have power in this city that doesn't come from elections or appointments. And yes, I've done things that would horrify you if you knew the details. Clara's hands trembled slightly. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you're dealing with, Giovanni leaned forward. But I also need you to understand something else. My mother is the moral center of my life. She's the reason I donate to hospitals, fund scholarships, and try to be more than what my father was. Everything good in me comes from her. Giovanni, you saved her life, Clara. Not just that night at the bus stop, but in how you did it. You could have walked away. You could have called 911 and left. Instead, you stayed. You fought for her. You paid for her medication with money you needed for rent, his voice roughened with emotion. Do you know what that means to me? Clara felt tears prick her eyes. I just did what anyone should do. But they don't. That's the point. Giovanni reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. You're a good person in a world that punishes goodness. And now you're caught in the middle of something dangerous because I wasn't careful enough to protect you. You've done nothing but protect me. I destroyed Eddie Caruso's life in 12 hours, Giovanni said quietly. Does that frighten you? Clara thought about it. It should. But no. He was a bad man doing bad things. You just exposed it. And if I told you I've done worse to people who threaten my family? She met his eyes. I'd believe you. And I'd understand why. Something shifted in Giovanni's expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. I have a proposition for you, he said. A job offer. Clara blinked.
A job.
My mother needs a personal assistant. Someone to help manage her schedule, accompany her to appointments, handle correspondence. Someone she trusts. Giovanni paused. She wants it to be you. Me? But I'm not qualified. You're exactly qualified. You have a medical background from your nursing assistant days. You're organized, responsible, and most importantly, my mother adores you. Giovanni named a salary that made Clara's breath catch. You'd live on the estate in the guest house, fully furnished, all utilities included. Health insurance, dental, a car. And most importantly, you'd be safe. Protected. Clara stared at him. This is too much. It's what the position pays. And Clara, this isn't charity. My mother genuinely needs help, and she wants someone who sees her as a person, not as the Russo matriarch. His voice softened. She talks about you constantly. How kind you were, how you held her hand in the ambulance. You made her feel safe when she was terrified. I don't know anything about your world. The people, the expectations. You'll learn. Marco will help you navigate everything. Giovanni leaned back. I won't lie to you. This life comes with complications. You'll meet people who are dangerous. You'll see things that might make you uncomfortable. But you'll also be part of something, a family that takes care of its own. Clara's mind spun. A real salary. A safe place to live. No more juggling 3 jobs, no more ramen dinners, no more fear. But also, Giovanni's world. The violence lurking beneath the surface. The knowledge that she'd be tied to a man who operated outside the law. What if I say no? She asked quietly. Giovanni's expression didn't change. Then Marco drives you home, and we remain friends. My mother will be disappointed, but she'll understand. And you'll still be protected. I won't let Marconi or anyone else hurt you. But you'll go back to struggling. Working yourself to exhaustion. Looking over your shoulder, Giovanni's eyes held hers. And I'll worry about you every single day. Clara felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Every practical part of her brain screamed to accept. Every cautious instinct warned her to run. Can I think about it? She whispered. Of course. Take all the time you need. But they both knew the answer. Clara thought about her empty apartment, her dwindling bank account, her complete lack of family or safety net. She thought about Isabella's warm smile, the way she'd called Clara an angel. She thought about Giovanni, who destroyed her enemies and was now offering her a lifeline, asking for nothing in return except that she care for his mother. I don't need time, Clara heard herself say. I'll do it. Giovanni's face transformed with a genuine smile. You will? On one condition. Clara's voice was stronger now. I want to do this job well. Really well. Not because you rescued me, but because I'm actually good at it. Can you accept that? I wouldn't want it any other way. Giovanni stood and extended his hand across the table. Clara took it, feeling the warmth of his grip, the calluses that spoke of a life more complicated than expensive suits suggested. Welcome to the family, Clara Mitchell, Giovanni said softly. And just like that, Clara's old life ended. The new one, dangerous, uncertain, but filled with possibility, had begun. The guest house was bigger than Clara's entire apartment had been. 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a bathroom with a tub that actually worked, and windows that overlooked the estate's gardens. When Marco had shown her around on her first day, Clara had stood in the middle of the living room and cried. Too much? Marco had asked gently.
No. It's perfect.
I didn't know places like this existed for people like me. You're not people like you anymore, Marco had said. Your family, that was 3 weeks ago. Now, Clara sat at Isabella's bedside, reading aloud from a novel about a woman who owned a bookshop in Paris. Isabella's eyes were closed, but Clara knew she was listening by the small smile on her face. And so she decided, Clara read, that every ending was simply a new beginning in disguise. Like you, Isabella murmured, opening her eyes. You had an ending, and now look at you. A beautiful new beginning. Clara set the book down. How are you feeling today? Any chest pain? Stop fussing. I'm fine, but Isabella's smile was warm. You're too good at this job, you know. I'm getting spoiled. That's the point. Clara checked Isabella's medication schedule on her tablet. You need to take your evening pills in an hour. And Dr. Morrison said to remind you about tomorrow's cardiology appointment. I don't need to go. Yes, you do. Giovanni will drive us himself if he has to. Isabella laughed. You're not afraid of him at all, are you?
Clara thought about that.
3 weeks ago, Giovanni had terrified her. Now, she'd learned to see past the intimidating exterior to the man underneath, devoted to his mother, fair with his people, surprisingly funny when he relaxed. I respect him, Clara said carefully. But no, I'm not afraid. Good. He needs more people in his life who aren't afraid. Isabella reached for Clara's hand. I'm so glad you're here, dear. You've brought light to this house. Not everyone agreed. Clara felt it most acutely during family meetings, when Giovanni's inner circle gathered in the main house to discuss business. She wasn't part of those meetings, but she often saw the men arriving and leaving. Vincent Conti, Giovanni's oldest advisor, never made eye contact with her. He'd mutter to Marco in Italian whenever she passed, his tone clearly disapproving. Anthony Rizzo, who handled security, watched her with open suspicion, as if waiting for her to prove she was a threat. Only Marco and a few others treated her with genuine warmth. One afternoon, Clara was helping Isabella down the garden path when Vincent and Giovanni emerged from the main house, deep in conversation. Too much access, Vincent was saying in a low voice. She's with your mother constantly. She hears phone calls, sees visitors. She's trustworthy. Giovanni cut him off. You've known her for a month. I know everything I need to know. Vincent noticed Clara and Isabella approaching and fell silent. He nodded stiffly to Isabella, ignored Clara completely, and walked away. Isabella sighed. Vincent is protective. He'll come around, but Clara wasn't so sure. The breakthrough came unexpectedly during the 3rd week. Clara was in the kitchen of the main house, preparing Isabella's special low-sodium lunch, when she heard shouting from Giovanni's office. Told you that shipment was compromised, Anthony Rizzo's voice, furious. Now we've got the feds sniffing around the warehouse. Clara froze, unsure whether to leave or stay. We contained it, Giovanni said, his voice tense. No one's talking.
Yet.
But if they pressure the dock workers. A crash, like something hitting a wall. Clara flinched. She should leave. This wasn't her business. But as she turned to go, she heard Giovanni's voice crack with exhaustion. I can't do this today, Anthony. My mother had a bad night. I haven't slept.
Just.
Handle it. Silence. Then Anthony's voice quieter. Boss, you need to take care of yourself. Your mother needs you healthy. I know. Clara made a decision. She finished Isabella's lunch, plated it beautifully, then prepared a second plate. She knocked on Giovanni's office door. Come in. Giovanni sat behind his desk, his tie loosened, exhaustion etched into his face. Anthony stood by the window, arms crossed. Both men looked at her in surprise. I made lunch for Isabella, Clara said, setting one plate on a side table. I made extra. You should eat too. She set the second plate on Giovanni's desk, along with a glass of iced tea. Anthony stared at her. We're in the middle of. You're in the middle of being human beings who need to eat, Clara said firmly. Both of you. 5 minutes won't hurt. She walked out before they could argue. 10 minutes later, Giovanni appeared in the garden where Clara was reading to Isabella. That was presumptuous, he said. Clara's heart sank. I'm sorry. I just thought. It was also exactly what I needed. Thank you, his smile was genuine. Anthony ate his lunch too. First time I've seen him stop working in 36 hours. From that day forward, Clara noticed a shift. Anthony nodded to her in the hallways. Vincent's scowls became less frequent. Even the guards who patrolled the estate started greeting her by name. She was becoming part of the fabric of this place. One evening, Clara sat with Isabella on the guest house porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Are you happy here?" Isabella asked suddenly. Clara thought about her old life, the fear, the exhaustion, the loneliness. Then she thought about the past 3 weeks, meaningful work, genuine connections, feeling safe for the first time in years. "Yes," she said softly. "I never imagined I could be, but yes." "Good," Isabella squeezed her hand. "Because Giovanni is planning something special. A family gathering next week. He wants to introduce you properly to everyone." Clara's stomach flipped. Everyone. Everyone who matters in our world. Isabella's eyes twinkled. "Don't worry. They'll love you." How could they not? Clara wasn't so sure. But as she watched the sun sink below the horizon, she realized something important. For the first time since her parents died, she wasn't alone. She had a home, a purpose, a family strange and complicated as it was. And she was ready to fight to keep it. Clara had never seen so many expensive suits in one place. The Russo estate's grand ballroom, which Clara hadn't even known existed until yesterday, glittered with chandeliers and was filled with at least 200 people. Men in tailored tuxedos, women in designer gowns, servers moving through the crowd with champagne on silver trays. "I can't do this," Clara whispered to Marco, who stood beside her in the entrance hall. "Yes, you can." Marco adjusted his own suit jacket. "You've faced down Marconi's thugs and won over Vincent Conti. This is just a party. A party where everyone is going to judge me. They're going to see exactly what Giovanni wants them to see, that you're under his protection, that you matter to this family." Marco's expression was serious. "This isn't just a social event, Clara. This is Giovanni making a statement." Before Clara could ask what he meant, Isabella appeared, stunning in a deep blue gown. "There you are." She took Clara's hands, her eyes shining. "You look beautiful, dear." Clara glanced down at her dress, a simple but elegant emerald green gown that Isabella had insisted on buying for her. It was the most expensive thing Clara had ever worn. "I feel like an imposter," Clara admitted. "Nonsense. You belong here." Isabella linked her arm through Clara's.
Come.
"Giovanni is waiting." They entered the ballroom together, and Clara felt dozens of eyes turn toward them. Conversations paused. She heard whispers ripple through the crowd. "That's her? Just some girl off the street." Saved Isabella's life, apparently. Giovanni stood near the center of the room, surrounded by several older men in expensive suits. When he saw Isabella and Clara, he immediately excused himself and walked toward them. He looked different tonight, commanding, powerful, every inch the man the newspapers wrote about. But when his eyes met Clara's, they softened. "You came," he said quietly. "Did I have a choice?" Clara tried to joke, but her voice shook. "Always." Giovanni offered her his arm. "Ready." "For what?" Instead of answering, Giovanni led her and Isabella to a raised platform at the end of the ballroom. He picked up a champagne flute and tapped it with a fork. The crystalline sound cut through the conversations, and the room fell silent. 200 faces turned toward them. Clara's heart hammered so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Giovanni began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the ballroom. "As many of you know, 6 weeks ago, my mother suffered a cardiac episode." Isabella squeezed Clara's hand. She was alone, in the rain, at a bus stop in a part of the city where people have learned to look the other way. Giovanni's voice was steady but emotional. 7 people walked past her that night. 7 people saw her struggling to breathe and decided it wasn't their problem. The room was absolutely silent. But one person stopped. One person abandoned her own responsibilities, her own livelihood, to save a stranger's life. Giovanni turned to Clara, and suddenly every eye in the room was on her. Clara Mitchell performed CPR for 9 minutes in the pouring rain. She rode with my mother to the hospital. She paid for medication with money she couldn't afford to lose. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She did all of this without knowing who my mother was, without expecting anything in return. She did it because it was right. Giovanni's voice grew stronger. And when dangerous people tried to use her kindness against this family, she refused to betray us. Even when threatened. Even when she had every reason to walk away. Whispers erupted around the room. Clara saw people exchanging glances, some surprised, others calculating. Clara Mitchell is now my mother's personal assistant, Giovanni continued. But more than that, she is under this family's protection. She is part of this household. And I want everyone in this room, everyone in this city, to understand what that means. He looked directly at several men scattered throughout the crowd, his gaze hard as steel. Anyone who threatens her threatens the Russo family. Anyone who harms her answers to me personally. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Is that understood? A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Giovanni raised his glass. To Clara Mitchell, the woman who reminded me that goodness still exists in this world. To Clara, the room echoed, glasses rising. Clara felt dizzy. She hadn't expected this public declaration, this unmistakable message that she was now part of something much bigger than herself. As the crowd returned to their conversations, people began approaching. Business associates congratulating her. Women in expensive jewelry sizing her up. Men who ran Giovanni's operations nodding with newfound respect. Through it all, Clara felt the weight of what had just happened. Giovanni hadn't just introduced her. He'd claimed her as family in front of the most powerful and dangerous people in the city. She caught sight of a man near the bar, older, with cold eyes and a calculating expression. He was watching her intently while speaking to two younger men. One of them pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. "Who's that?" Clara asked Marco, who had materialized at her side. Marco followed her gaze, and his expression darkened. Salvatore Luciano. He runs operations in the South District. Marconi's biggest ally. Why is he here? Giovanni invites everyone to these gatherings. Keep your friends close and your enemies visible. Marco moved slightly, positioning himself between Clara and Luciano's line of sight. Don't worry. He won't try anything here. But Clara noticed Luciano watching her throughout the evening, his expression thoughtful, as if he were working out a puzzle. Later, as the party began to wind down, Giovanni found Clara on the terrace, taking a break from the overwhelming attention. "You survived," he said, joining her at the railing. Barely, Clara looked at him. "Why did you do that? Make such a big deal about me?" "Because you needed to be protected. And in my world, protection requires clarity." Giovanni's voice was serious. "Now everyone knows. You're not just someone I'm helping. You're family. There are rules about family." "What rules?" "You don't touch them. Ever." Giovanni looked out at the estate grounds. "Marconi got the message. His people will back off. And anyone else who might have thought about using you, they'll think twice now." Clara absorbed this. "So I'm safe. As safe as anyone in this life can be." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the ballroom, Isabella watched them through the window, a knowing smile on her face. And across the city, in a dingy office above a pawn shop, Tony Marconi watched footage from the party on his laptop, his face twisted with rage. Clara Mitchell wasn't just protected now. She was untouchable. And that changed everything. The last guest left at midnight. Clara helped Isabella remove her jewelry in the main house bedroom, her fingers carefully unclasping the diamond necklace that had belonged to Giovanni's grandmother. "That went well, don't you think?" Isabella asked, watching Clara's reflection in the mirror. "Everyone was staring at me all night." "Of course they were. You're the girl who saved my life and captured my son's admiration." Isabella turned to face Clara directly. "Do you know what Giovanni told me yesterday?" Clara shook her head. He said you remind him of what he wanted to be before life made him hard. He said you give him hope. Isabella's eyes glistened with tears. I haven't heard my son talk about hope in 20 years. Clara's throat tightened. I'm just doing my job.
No, dear.
You're doing so much more than that. Isabella pulled Clara into a hug. You're reminding us all what matters. A knock at the door interrupted them. Giovanni stood in the doorway, his tie undone, jacket slung over his shoulder. He looked exhausted but content. Ready to go home? He asked. Isabella stood, linking one arm through Clara's and the other through Giovanni's. Walk with me. Both of you. I want to see the gardens in the moonlight. They walked through the estate's grand hallways, past staff members cleaning up from the party, through the French doors and into the cool night air. The garden paths were lit by soft lanterns, and the fountain in the center courtyard sparkled like liquid silver. Do you remember, Isabella said softly, when you were a boy, Giovanni, and you asked me what made someone part of a family? Giovanni smiled. I said it was blood. And I told you that you were wrong. Isabella squeezed both their arms. Family is chosen. Family is who shows up when everything falls apart, who sees you at your worst and stays anyway. They walked in silence past the rose bushes, the night jasmine filling the air with its sweet scent. Clara thought about the rainy night 6 weeks ago. She'd been a struggling delivery girl with no one and nothing, terrified and alone. She'd stopped at that bus stop not because she was brave or special, but because she couldn't walk away from someone who needed help. One choice, one moment of compassion. And it had changed everything. I need to tell you both something, Clara said suddenly. They stopped walking. Giovanni and Isabella looked at her with concern. I've been scared, Clara admitted. Every day since I accepted this job, I've been terrified that I'd wake up and this would all disappear. That I'd mess up somehow and lose this. Her voice broke. Lose you both. Clara. Giovanni started, but she shook her head. Let me finish. I spent so long alone after my parents died. I forgot what it felt like to have people who cared, who noticed when I was tired or sad or scared. Tears streamed down Clara's face. You gave me more than a job or a home. You gave me a family. And I need you to know that I won't take that for granted. Ever. Isabella was crying too, pulling Clara into another tight embrace. You silly girl. Don't you understand? We're the ones who are grateful. You gave me my life back. You gave my son someone to believe in again. Giovanni wrapped his arms around both of them, his voice rough with emotion. You're stuck with us now, Clara Mitchell. No backing out. They stood there in the moonlit garden, 3 people who'd found each other through chance and crisis and kindness, holding on to something precious and unexpected. Finally, they pulled apart, laughing and wiping tears. Come on, Isabella said, her voice warm. It's late, and we all need sleep. They walked together toward the guest house, Clara's home now, truly her home. Giovanni on one side, Isabella on the other, their footsteps crunching softly on the gravel path. Clara looked up at the stars scattered across the black sky. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 weeks ago, broke, alone, fighting just to survive. That girl would never have believed this moment was possible. Thank you, she whispered. For what? Giovanni asked. For seeing me, for letting me be part of this. No, Isabella said firmly. Thank you for stopping at that bus stop. Thank you for having a good heart in a world that tries to harden everyone. They reached the guest house porch. Inside, the lights were on. Marco had prepared evening tea, as he did every night now, leaving it in a thermos with Clara's favorite cookies. Breakfast tomorrow? Giovanni asked. All 3 of us? I'm thinking pancakes. You don't cook, Isabella said with mock severity. I'll order from that place Clara likes. Clara laughed, a real, genuine laugh that echoed through the quiet night. That sounds perfect. She hugged them both goodnight and watched as they walked back toward the main house, Giovanni's arm protective around his mother's shoulders. Clara stood on her porch, looking at the beautiful estate that was now her home. At the guest house that held more comfort than any place she'd ever lived. At the family she'd found in the most unexpected way. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a delivery girl with 3 jobs and no hope. Tonight, she was Clara Mitchell, assistant to Isabella Russo, protected by the most powerful family in the city, and most importantly, loved. She'd stopped at a bus stop in the rain to save a dying stranger. And in doing so, she'd saved herself. Clara walked inside, closing the door softly behind her, no longer afraid of tomorrow. Because tomorrow, she'd wake up with purpose, with family, with home. And that was worth more than anything she'd ever imagined.
The end.